Okay, so today we're going to um, dive into some really interesting stuff. We're looking at how some key campaign promises are maybe starting to change a little bit.
Sounds intriguing.
Yeah, it should be interesting. We've got a transcript here from the Ring of Fire YouTube channel, and they break down this video called Trump Backtracks on Yet Another Major Campaign Promise.
Another one, huh?
Well, that's what they say, right? So we're going to look at this promise about the Russia-Ukraine conflict and how things are looking now from people in Trump's circle.
Okay, so what did he initially promise versus what's happening now?
Yeah, that's exactly it.
Yeah.
So the original promise was pretty clear-cut, right?
Oh, yeah, I remember this.
Trump, during the campaign, said over and over that he could end the whole Russia-Ukraine thing really fast.
Like, how fast are we talking?
He said in a day or less, even.
Wow, that's a bold statement for sure.
Right. And the transcript quotes him directly, end the conflict between Russia and Ukraine in a day or less than a day.
So no room for interpretation there.
Nope. Pretty straightforward.
Yeah.
And that was kind of a big part of his whole campaign message on this issue.
Okay, so that's the starting point. And now?
Now things seem to be shifting a bit. The transcript brings up Keith Kellogg.
Who's that?
They describe him as a special envoy to Ukraine and part of Trump's team. So someone who should know the ins and outs of the situation.
Okay, makes sense.
And Kellogg did this interview on Fox News recently where he's talking about the conflict.
I'm guessing it wasn't, we'll have this wrapped up by tomorrow.
You're right about that. It's quite a different tone. Kellogg mentions this goal of 100 days initially, which is already way longer than a day.
Yeah, just a tad.
But then he says something that's really interesting, and this is straight from the transcript. Things over there are actually pretty damn complicated.
Okay, so a little more realistic maybe.
A lot more realistic, I'd say.
Yeah.
It just paints such a different picture than that super confident one-day promise.
Makes you wonder what was going on there with that initial statement.
Right? Like, was it just to grab attention or...
Who knows, but it's definitely a change. The commentator in the transcript straight up calls it walking back a campaign promise.
And they don't hold back. They call the original claim laughable.
Yeah, I mean, it is kind of hard to imagine ending a conflict like that in a day.
Yeah, especially something as complex as this. The commentator goes even further and lays out how they think Trump could have actually done it in a day.
Like, what's their theory?
It's pretty extreme. The commentator says the only way would be to force Ukraine to surrender. Maybe even by threatening to use nukes.
Whoa, okay, that's a very specific and intense take.
It is. But it shows how strongly they feel about Trump's stance on this whole thing.
And they say something else pretty strong, too.
You're talking about the very clearly on Putin's side comment.
Exactly. That's a bold statement.
It is, but it's important to remember that this is the commentator's opinion from the source material. We're just laying out what they said.
Got it.
The commentator also acknowledges that the rest of the world does appear to be siding with Ukraine. So it's not like this is happening in isolation.
Right, there's a whole global context to consider.
Exactly. But one thing that stood out to me was the commentator's reaction to Kellogg's statements. It's like they're almost surprised that he's being more realistic about the situation.
Like they expected him to just double down on the one-day promise.
Yeah, exactly. They say that Kellogg maybe understands that things are a little more complicated.
So even the commentator, who's clearly critical of the initial promise, sees this as a significant shift.
That's what I thought, too. It's like they're acknowledging that at least someone in Trump's circle is being more honest about the complexity of the situation.
Makes you think about what this all means for voters, right? Like, how are they supposed to make sense of these changing messages?
That's a great point. And the transcript actually goes on to talk about this. The commentator is worried that voters will just believe whatever insane thing the leader of the day has to say.
It's like they're saying people aren't thinking critically enough.
Yeah, and they use examples like grocery prices and the Ukraine conflict as things where voters might have these unrealistic expectations.
Because politicians make these big promises that sound good, but aren't really realistic.
Right. And they're pretty harsh about it, too. They say if someone really believed Trump could end the war in 24 hours or less, then you're too stupid. Somebody else should be making decisions for you.
Ouch. That's a strong statement.
Definitely.
Yeah.
But again, this is a direct quote from the commentator. We're just presenting what they said.
Okay, understood.
And after that, they kind of shift gears a little bit and start talking about Trump's upcoming inauguration.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
And they're not exactly optimistic about it.
Yeah.
They even use the word grim to describe what they think might happen.
So they see these shifts in rhetoric as a bad sign for what's to come.
That's how I read it. And then they bring up AI policy.
AI.
Oh, wow. Wow.
A whole other topic.
I know, right? but it's connected. They're talking about how Trump has said he'll get rid of Biden's AI safeguards.
What kind of safeguards?
The commentator calls them radical leftist roadblocks to innovation. So there's a clear framing there.
Right. They're painting a picture of these regulations as being bad for progress.
Exactly. And the commentator talks about how this could be seen as freedom for technology from one perspective.
Like letting the tech industry do whatever they want.
Right. But then they contrast that with the other side that sees it as potentially leading to fewer rules, more spyware, and zero regard for human rights.
So a much more negative view of deregulation.
Yeah, and it just shows how the same policy can be interpreted in completely different ways.
That's politics for you, I guess.
Pretty much. And the commentator also brings up Elon Musk.
What does he have to do with this?
They're worried about his potential involvement in shaping these AI policies.
Because of his companies and influence.
Yeah, and they think it could blur the lines between truth, opinion, and propaganda even more.
That's a big concern for sure.
It is, and it all circles back to what we were talking about earlier with voters needing to be more critical of the information they're getting.
Right. It's about seeing through the spin and understanding the different perspectives.
Exactly. And the transcript ends with the commentator talking about their partnership with Ground News.
Is that like a news organization?
It's a tool that helps you see different sides of news coverage. They even give a discount code for their Vantage plan.
Okay, interesting. So it's like a resource for people who want to be more informed.
Yeah, that's the idea. So now that we've gone through all this, what do you think the main takeaway is for listeners?
Well, for me, it's this disconnect between that super simple, confident campaign promise about the Russia-Ukraine conflict and what we're hearing now from people like Kellogg.
Like a reality check.
Exactly. The commentator sees it as Trump basically backing down from something he couldn't actually deliver on.
And they're raising these bigger questions about how voters should evaluate promises and the complexities of actually governing.
Right. It's not as easy as just saying, I'll fix it in a day.
Definitely.
Yeah.
So as we wrap up here, what are some final thoughts you'd leave listeners with?
I think it's all about being more aware and critical of the information we're bombarded with every day. We need to be able to see through the spin and the rhetoric and really understand the different perspectives on complex issues.
Like, the whole thing with the Ukraine conflict is a perfect example. It's easy to get caught up in these simple solutions, but the reality is always way more complicated.
Absolutely. So I guess my challenge to listeners is to keep asking questions, keep digging deeper, and don't just take things at face value.
Well said. That's a great note to end on. Thanks for joining me for this deep dive.
It was my pleasure. Always good to chat.
Until next time.
See you then.